This is the podcast I know you've been looking forward to probably since we started talking about doing the podcast, virtual education. And a Washington Post article on July 19th explained the rise in microschools, pandemic pods, and networks to support students as they return to school in the fall, however that may look. And when we first started talking about virtual education as an episode for the podcast, we were not expecting half the world to be in a virtual education setting, but now they are. And a Facebook group is dedicated to helping families and connect how they learn to do this. Drew 3,400 members in 9 days. At least 7 local groups have spun off. Virtual education and homeschooling and co-ops, they aren't new, but COVID-19 has sure brought them to the forefront, hasn't it?
It sure has, Holland. And, there are multiple school districts right now across the country and around the world that are not planning to open in-person learning for students in the 2020 fall school year. They will some be 100% virtual. There are some teacher unions that are arguing we're not going back until it's safe. Some school districts are going to follow a virtual or hybrid option. And as the reality of COVID-19 hits, we have to understand this limited face-to-face gathering. Our culture must take a realistic approach to creative learning environments.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Vaughn.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
So tonight we will have a conversation with Marissa Di Pasquale, the CEO and founder of Mindsets Learning. And Marissa, just looking at your resume and some of the things you posted on your site, I know you are very, very engaged. But could you please share a little bit about your work and what you're doing? And if I pronounced your name, mispronounced it, please forgive me.
Oh, no, that's fine. And thank you, Amy and Holland, for having myself and also Tom on the podcast. We're really excited to be here. So Mindsets, it's a tool and library for teachers to use to engage students in learning math remotely. And it's all about real-world problems, students exploring the world, figuring out how the world works through the eyes of math. And so we offer teachers a whole range of topics, teaching math, all aligned to their state standards through topics like sport, entertainment, conservation, data science, wellness, and so forth. So we've seen such a surge in use of the mindsets over the summer, and we're looking forward to supporting teachers and families with back to school.
Wonderful. So excited about that.
In addition to Marissa, we have Tom Davis with us tonight. He's currently the Director of Business Development at the Center for Educational Innovation in New York and has served in the same capacity for both the California Association of Latino Superintendents and Administrators and the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. Tom is also an advisor to Mindsets Learning, so that's a lot of development and advice you're giving, Tom. What's keeping you busy?
I appreciate that, Holland. I'm always busy. My wife's keeps telling me, Tom, just say no, but I can't do it, Holland.
Well, we are so excited to have both of you here at the Afterword table, even though it is a virtual table anymore. For a lot of our listeners, especially those who are not educators, who are coming into this fall with a lot of things different, we may need to understand some key terms in virtual education. So what are some of the new vocabulary we are going to be hearing as schools reopen this fall?
Yeah, Amy, so we'll be hearing 3 different sorts of words. Or the first sort are the words about how teaching and learning is carried out, whether teachers are at home or at school. So those are words like remote teaching or hybrid teaching, where in hybrid teaching, students and teachers will have some days at school and some days at home. We'll also obviously be hearing words like screens, synchronous, asynchronous, which means synchronous online, asynchronous meaning part online, part offline. Breakout rooms, which is when students are working in sort of smaller rooms with their coaches or teachers. And there'll be also words around professional learning that teachers will need. The second sort of words will be those around equity and inclusion to support all students, particularly students who don't have the same access to resources as they would have in the classroom. And the third, and probably one of the most important, is student wellbeing, with like mindfulness and social emotional learning. It's really hard on students to be able to form relationships with teachers and their peers through two layers of screens. And so social emotional learning and mindfulness, wellbeing are words that will be used and you'll hear about as well.
I think those really encapsulate a lot of what we're hearing right now. But I think for the layperson, knowing things like synchronous and asynchronous and well-being and social emotion, those things are so key, because I think if we don't understand the new language, it makes it scary. And so I really appreciate you helping us understand those.
I was sitting here thinking about synchronous and asynchronous learning. That's something that I know I've worked with several online higher education marketing companies, and that's something that we've talked about for a long time, and we've had to explain every time what the difference is between synchronous and asynchronous learning. But it's going to be interesting to me to see if we move a little bit. I think asynchronous has, for a lot of higher education, that's kind of been the way they've wanted to go because it's so flexible, and that's kind of the demand. But for K-12 students, it'll be interesting to me to see whether synchronous or asynchronous kind of wins out as the word people want to, people are looking for, when they see it.
Experimentation as well with these words and these methods over the fall. And so teachers will need extra support to be able to see what works for them and what situations will one versus the other be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one of the arguments people are making right now against virtual education is the lack of face-to-face connection with others. When Amy and I had a podcast episode a few months ago about artificial intelligence, one of our guests, Dr. Wyatt, said, we are embodied people, and technology can do a lot, but it has its limitations. In thinking about the lack of face-to-face connection with others, how does virtual education foster social emotional learning, connection, and collaboration?
I'll try that one, Holland. First of all, I'll reiterate and say it again and again and again. Nothing can ever replace teachers in the classroom. That's something that's just a natural phenomenon there's nothing like a great teacher in the classroom teaching. But with technology and given our current circumstances, we have to adapt. And I do think that technologies are there now that will allow us to become great online remote teachers. The issue I think we have right now is that many of our teachers have been in the classroom for quite a while, and we're trying to teach the digital natives. So the importance of professional development and teaching teachers the building blocks of teaching remotely are going to be paramount. We have to be able to adjust and adapt and transform what was happening in the classrooms now to what's happening in our homes and in a virtual environment. So I think really the technology, I wish I would have invested in Zoom 6 months ago, because that's the norm now, I think, for a lot of schools and school districts using that tool and that resource. You can still connect with the kid. I often tell folks, if I were to go back to the classroom, I definitely would lead with social emotional learning and make connections with my students. I had 180 of them in my classes when I was teaching biology. So I would lead definitely with some sort of social emotional activities with my kids, know more about them, how to motivate them, what their strengths, their values, and their interests are before I even think about teaching them biology. So I think you can do that with the connectivity we have. If you have access and you have the internet, you can still do things like that as teachers, make connections with kids, which is really what it should be all about anyway. And then be able to use the tools and resources that are out there, like whiteboards, electronic whiteboards, and ways to show kids and demonstrate and use resources like computational thinking boards or design thinking boards that we could use with our students. Videos, streaming videos that we could use, URLs, YouTube sites. Those are all things that are out there that would help with connection and with collaboration. Because right now, the main thing is engaging kids in this online environment. We've got to re-engage them. A lot of kids are not linked in. We've got to figure out ways to re-engage them by providing these kinds of curriculum and one-to-ones that we have that teachers can create with their kids once that connection and that access to the internet problem has been solved.
That's excellent. And let's just again, because we aren't talking to all educators on the Afterword, explain, Tom, what a digital native is.
A digital native is not you and me. It's this young millennial generation that kind of grew up with their iPhones and their phones and their video games. And these kids are, I have to go to my 27-year-old son to learn how to do anything new. So digital natives basically are millennials, are these young kids that grew up in this generation of technology. I consider myself a member of that Triassic era.
Okay. Not quite that far back. Oh, good. Well, that's good way to think about it. We do need to think about the social notional first and those connectivity places. And I think as your point with digital natives and these kids who have grown up with devices in their hands all the time, that makes the challenge for connection even harder sometimes.
Correct.
And so we're really going to have to use maybe some of the skills that we have as older, wiser adults to help them understand the benefits of some of that human connection.
I think we have to meet kids where they are. I think, for veteran teachers, they've got to understand that. It's not, the old ways don't work. We have to engage kids where they are now, and we have to figure out ways to do that.
Exactly. Excellent. So in some of our communities, though, there is an absence of reliable broadband networks. So what are communities going to be able to do in school systems? How can they better support this need for our students who need this virtual connection?
Absolutely. Well, if there's a silver lining to COVID, the one silver lining that I see is that it has exposed the inequities out there with access to the internet, for sure. And I think people are doing something about it now. I mean, I see a bunch of grants available and CARES funding and different funding sources and resources coming to many states now to do something about it. So we're working with a couple of rural schools because in many cases, the rural schools often get the short end of the stick when it comes to these issues. People forget about them. And a rural school for us is considered a school district with less than 2,500 students in it. And in our state of California, where I'm from, in Texas, we have over 1,000 school districts. 65% of the school districts in California are under 2,500 in student population. So our rural areas are the ones really in most need for connectivity. And these students are getting shortchanged because they don't have access. So there's a couple things we're doing now, and I'll put a couple plugs in for a couple of partners that we work with. One is called Primo Energy, and the other one is Locket, L-O-K-K-E-T, free Wi-Fi. So what we're doing is we're writing grants and we're getting the word out to these rural communities and areas that need hotspot support, where we can put in renewable energy sources like these energy trees, energy plants that are connected to routers that can expand Wi-Fi access in hard-to-get areas that are off the grid. They're called nanogrids. And so they can research more about that kind of effort now, which is really cool because now we can expand Wi-Fi in areas. And the schools can be the hubs for these networks. And the access would be free to all kids, all nonprofits. And it's a great model. So we're looking at more and more of that. So I'll repeat that. Primo Energy Plants or trees and Locket is another partner that we're using to expand Wi-Fi in these tough areas.
Can I follow up just a little bit with that? I mean, the COVID pandemic is not obviously just in the US, it's global. And when we think about educational equity for people around the world and in countries around the world, how do you see this affecting people in countries where access to the internet is even more lopsided than it may be in the US? And what opportunities does this open up for countries that have had the opportunity in a way to leapfrog over
several decades of older technology and are now using cellular technology pretty fluently and pretty widely and broadly in countries?
Absolutely. The biggest problem I have right now that I'm trying to cope with is right here in our own country with our Navajo Nation and our American Indian population. They don't have running water. They don't have energy or access to energy. They don't have internet. So let's start here first before we go to Africa or Mexico or other places. We've got to take care of our own here. Obviously, I'm really interested in renewable energy resources because we're playing off of the wind and solar energy in a battery storage facility, basically providing energy to power up these routers and get access. So to your point, this could work anywhere in the world. We're having doing some work right now in San Diego here with a local school district and a 6th grade teacher who has an energy plant at her school site. And she's having the kids design a system where we can take a bucket of water that's in an area. They have 4 garden beds out there in their school. So they do a lot of gardening. And the kids are designing right now a way to pump water from the energy plant to their flower gardens. So this can happen all over the world. And kids need to understand the importance of sun and wind power and be able to understand battery storage and Bernoulli's principle and principles of converters and inverters and start doing things that make sense, that are efficient and economic. So I really think that's going to be the future. And I do think that we need to start with our kids a lot earlier in their elementary school grades, up into the career pathways and so forth to get into this whole area and this whole space. So the problem can be solved. And I love the fact that these are off the grid. So excited about that.
Marissa, I think, was going to jump in because she's from a different country, not the United States.
Oh, so I spent half my time in the United States and the other half in Australia. And I've worked in telecommunications for many years. You know, around the world, where you've had strong telecommunication networks, you typically have had really, good coverage. Countries like Australia have been able to cover over 90% of the population. But you always have problems because, personally, I know, I once lived in a beautiful town where our house was in a black spot, and I used to have to drive down to the parking lot of the beach to be able to get even a hotspot on my cell phone. And it was impossible to work, and I'd hate to have been in that environment right now. If you're a family in a normal sort of environment, but you're in a black spot, that's tough. But a lot of other countries in the world where they haven't had strong broadband or telecommunication networks, they've built sophisticated mobile networks, and the populations have moved mobile. So mobile learning is going to be an important part of solutions going forward. There are 55 million cell phones out there that kids have, and it's tricky to be able to teach and learn through a mobile phone because of just the nature of how content needs to be, displayed and curated and interacted with. But this is an area of innovation, and for teachers who are looking to experiment, mobile learning may be a great way forward. So there are solutions. There's no one perfect solution. It's going to be a need to, where we've had in the past the need to cater for students with diversity, now we have to expand the definition of diversity to include students' access as diversity, regardless of their socioeconomic backgrounds, regardless of their technology savviness. Diversity now needs to also include methods for supporting students who might be bright, who might be academically competent, but who may not have the right type of access to their home or in their community.
That's an excellent point, Marissa. I experienced that with a lot of my students this year. And so, both of you, I really appreciate these points. Well, we have an expert in solving Wi-Fi connection and broadband issues also with us, Andy Vaughn from Transportant, and he's going to share a few things with us. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about you and what is Transportant?
thank you, Amy and Holland, and thank you for the opportunity to join you on this podcast. Transportant is a fully integrated student transportation management platform. And what we have done is we've put together all of the different technologies that are typically on a school bus: live video, GPS, ridership student tracking, unlimited in-transit Wi-Fi, mobile app for parents to proactively know where their child is, little things like that. And we put it all together for about the price that most school districts are used to paying for cameras alone. The mission is to really make sure the students are as safe as possible. They arrive at school in the best frame of mind to continue their education without absolutely demolishing the budget of the transportation department, right? So that's who and what Transportant is, and that's what we've been doing starting out of Kansas City and mostly focusing on the Midwest.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we were talking with Marissa Di Pasquale and Tom Davis about solutions for communities that have poor or limited broadband in this new direction of virtual education. So how has this need become critical, and what can you provide as far as solutions?
Yeah, it's been absolutely critical. I think a lot of school districts have been astounded at the lack of internet access in many of these children's homes. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and I think in one of the silver linings to this COVID and this remote learning new world that we're in is, we're finally learning lessons that maybe we should have learned before, but thankfully, hey, better late than never. We're learning that a lot of these students have a great need, and they're ill-equipped to have remote learning. We have seen a lot of districts try to, when everything kind of hit, a lot of districts were just scrambling because, hey, we'll just go to remote learning. But they realized a large percentage, sometimes 50, 60, 70% of their students simply did not have the tools at home to continue their education at home. So, there's a couple of options. There's some smart hotspots that people are able to put out, and they have individual plans. A lot of school districts are finding those out directly with, the network providers. Our solution is a little more unorthodox. Our bread and butter is a school bus. Like that's who and what we're all about. So what we've designed is a rolling study hall of sorts. Now, this was something we were doing before COVID, but we emphasized it once COVID hit. But the idea of pre-COVID was, hey, while these kids, some of these students, they're on the bus an hour and a half every day, why not get their schoolwork done? Why not have safe, fully filtered internet so they can get ahead of their schoolwork? Football teams, when they're these long away games, they miss their entire day of school. And, their education is one of the most important elements of their development. So we needed to allow school districts to have the tools to continue that education, even when they're on a away game for a football game or what have you, right? So the rolling study hall was just very simple. Like, we were going to provide unlimited Wi-Fi on the school bus, and as the bus went around, kids could do their schoolwork. In this post-COVID world, obviously, it's really hard to adhere to social distancing while having a bus full of 70 kids, right? So, right now what we've had to do is increase the radius that the Wi-Fi network is accessible by. And a lot of school districts, what they'll do is they'll just park the school bus in a apartment complex. Now, obviously, it's really hard to get through a bunch of concrete walls with multiple users, but schools have been having their kids just pull up and be in their car or be able to adhere to social distancing guidelines and continue their education from their apartment complex or a park or fire station or wherever they decided to park.
Wow, that's so interesting to me. And I think for a while we've been talking about how one of the elements of inequity that we're starting to experience is access to the internet. I mean, that wasn't, I was in college before the internet was a thing. Right? Yeah, I remember getting my first Hotmail account. I was 19 and I was afraid I was going to break it. Yeah. But now that really is maybe more than anything else, maybe more than access to anything, unless it's like food or healthcare. Access to technology is the real differentiator between people who have a chance at success and people who don't.
I 100% agree. Yes. I mean, the opportunities are almost endless when you have internet, right? And when you don't have it, you are shut off from like so much more than just education. Your networking capabilities. It dramatically reduces your opportunities when you don't have regular access to internet. I 100% agree.
There are all these homeschooling pods that are cropping up now too, that hire people like Amy to teach them, or that have an internet-based instructor or something like that. So
right.
Are people working with you? Are these homeschooling pods also like working with you, like you were describing?
Yeah, not yet. I mean, we're very open to that. We are here to make a change. We want to make a difference in education. We haven't had a lot of outreach from homeschooling pods. Mostly it's been school districts,
Sure.
A few charter schools here and there have reached out to us. But that's been the main people that we've been hearing from.
How do you help support some of those more rural communities? Because, one of the things that Tom was expressing was that's a huge issue. And here in the Southeast, we have rural areas, and especially where Holland and I are in South Carolina, that is a big deal. So what can you help us understand with this bus system? How could that support the rural communities?
Well, with our system, we put an antenna on top of the bus, and they use the metal roof basically to boost the signal, much like a satellite dish. But adaptation is the name of the game right now. I mean, that is the name of the game. People have to adapt. The old way of doing things, it just right now it's not feasible. And so what we've been helping people do is in these rural areas is helping them understand like the opportunities available with a rolling study hall to park the bus. And, let's say, well, hey, even, there's really limited cell phone reception here. It's like, okay, well, where is there good cell phone reception? Well, at this park. Like, okay, well, that's your new school. That is your new schoolroom. Let's work with the city governments to, allow more people to come or what have you. So we've really been just trying to help them adapt and see there's more than one way to do things. And because there has to be, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. And right now there's great need in continuing the education of our students who, they lost so much time last school year, and many are fearful of losing more now. So we're trying to help them to understand that adaptation is the name of the game.
Great answer. I really like that the top of the bus can be the satellite.
Hey, it's amazing what you can do when you just kind of put your mind to it. And our team of engineers are second to none. Alan Fairless, our CTO, his background is data security, so everything he does is security first, but you can still get a lot of great things done.
So if people want to get in touch with you, Andy, and learn more about Transportant, where would they contact you?
Absolutely. www.transportant.com. You can find us there. There's a number to call. We're very transparent about our pricing because we know when decisions need to be made quickly, you need to know the bottom line, right? So we have a pricing page where you can put the number of buses in there. Check us out there, and we'll be able to get in touch.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Andy Vaughn, Transportant. And we are going to continue our conversation now with Marissa and Tom.
Actually, I want to get back just for a second to what you were saying, Marissa. I worked in international development for 7 years, and mobile technology was really starting to come into play about the last year or two that I was in it. But I just can't even imagine now what mobile technology can do for education, for healthcare, for vocations in developing countries. It's unfathomable how it could completely, I hate this word, but disrupt international development almost as an entire sector.
It's interesting because educational technology developers have been discouraged from developing mobile first because most schools up to recently had banned mobile phones in the classroom. And so what has really driven development of technology applications has been cross-browser, devices, being able to support Chromebooks, laptops, and mobile phones have typically been mobile first for those tools that typically are sort of student-facing but more consumer-friendly or designed for adults and learning. And so we have teams who have got lots of resources have been able to always keep mobile first in their minds or develop mobile apps. So in our team at Mindsets Learning, we've always had mobile first. Because we see that particularly over the summer, where teachers have always browsed for new resources using their mobile phones, and so it's been patchy, during the year. But hopefully we'll see some resurgence of new applications or redevelopment of tools that are mobile first, and that gives teachers a wider choice. If you are using a tool right now that is really only designed for a Chromebook, then you might have a problem, because not every student who might have accessed that Chromebook on a cart at school may not have access to that Chromebook at home. So this will hopefully, there might be a lag, but hopefully there'll be a resurgence of development around mobile applications.
Excellent. Thank you.
For sure. So, Tom, what are some of the unique barriers and benefits that English language learners might experience with virtual learning?
That's a great question, Han. Thank you for that lead in, because I was in a bilingual classroom, like I said, for 15 years, teaching a content area, biology, in Spanish to level 1 kids. And so I've got some really good insight. If I may, I would love to also include 2 other groups that often get left out in our conversation. One is our special education group, and the other one are our gifted and talented kids that in some respects get left out. So what's happening right now, and in my opinion, with COVID, is that the kids that are really struggling the most through this pandemic are our English learners, are our special education kids, and our kids that struggle as students, the kids that will never be able to learn remotely. So in my opinion, those 3 groups of kids have got to come to some facility or some place to get adult instruction. They have to come to a place. In lieu of that, because of where we are right now, the things that I see positive and things that we can do to support our English learners. And by the way, in California, 35% of every classroom has an English learner in it. And that demographic is rapidly growing across the country. So we've got to start thinking about this now and not keep our heads in the sand. We got to start dealing with this issue across the country. And so some of the things that I share often with our folks is we have to, first of all, attend to our students' needs first. We have to make sure our students, even though it's a virtual environment, feel welcome, they feel that they're engaged, they're affirmed, and they're supported in their language and academic content development. We've got to continue to be able to help kids move through. Most kids in our system need to be reclassified, and they get stuck at level 3. So we've got to continue to have programs that will help monitor the progress of our ELs. We've got to ensure that their language, their content, their curriculum includes both language and grade level content. And we've got to create enough opportunities for our ELs to be able to practice all the 4 of the domains of language proficiency. The second area we need to work on are engaging our families. And by that I mean we have to provide information in their native language. It doesn't have to be Spanish, it can be any language to support them, of our limited English proficient parents in their native language. We've got to be able to leverage student and family native language proficiencies. We've got to be able to provide additional support for families, like translations, that don't have legal status, the DACA kids, and the kids who may be experiencing added stress because of what's going on right now. And finally, we need to support our educators with more professional development around classroom content and differentiating instruction for our ELs through programs like GLAD, which is Guided Language Acquisition Design, SEDAI, which is Specially Designed Academics in English, and SIOP practices. Those are the main practices that are out there when you're looking for support for ELs. And finally, we need to provide opportunities for more collaboration between our classroom and content teachers and our English language teachers, and make sure that they're collaborating in a positive way. Those are the silver linings. I think if we can do those kinds of things in this environment virtually, should be able to help those groups of kids. I'm talking also about accommodating our special needs kids, kids on the spectrum, and particularly our gifted and talented, our gay kids, because we need to extend those kids in a personalized way to make sure they get the maximum they can get, what they're trying to learn, instead of having them always help, our slowest learners or the kids that struggle. It's not fair to them. So those are my thoughts on ELs.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think a lot of the things that Marissa was also talking about with the cell phones and the mobile devices and being able to use some of those hopefully will be good resources, but we do need to think of all equity, all of our students in every way. And, when I think one of the things that really needs to be hammered home to teachers is to help our teachers understand that these are children, especially our English language learners, are coming with 2 languages. How intelligent are these students to be coming and trying to navigate? I had a Chinese roommate in college, and she would translate her book in Chinese before she could study it. So, we have to make those assumptions that these students are coming and these families are coming with enormous amounts of gifts and talents, and to celebrate that. So thank you, Tom, for sharing that. So as we close today, what is an essential element we need to understand as we consider engagement and virtual learning? Marissa, I'm going to start with you first.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just make a comment? I've got my essential element ready to talk about. I just really wanted to add a comment about the language learners.
Absolutely. Please do.
Yeah, we've worked with Tom now for 2 years on this particular problem of supporting language learners and kids with special needs. And we've now integrated technology to support over students and also for their families with over 70 languages. And from, Haitian Creole to Spanish, from Hindi to French to German, 3 versions of Spanish as well. We're so excited to be able to offer this, game-changing solution and service to students and families. The tool is called the Open Reader. It's built into all Mindsets challenges. It's student-facing, so students decide when they want to click on it. It's one click. Any content they see, they can translate, including any of their own our responses. They can actually listen in their own native language and also then translate it and see the English as well as the other language. A little unknown fact about me is that I was a language learner, and maybe Tom was too, but I did not speak English before, as my native language. My parents were Italian, migrants. My grandfather was American, but my parents were Italian. And so, when I learned English many, many years ago, it was because I was in the classroom with native English speakers, and then I would go home and talk Italian to my parents. And it was obviously very quick to pick up the English, but you were surrounded by kids who spoke English. Now in a COVID environment, kids who are language learners may not have that luxury, and so it means we need to support them even more so. And by having a way of listening to words, not just reading, but listening, hopefully that will help them pick up the English, as well as supporting them in just better reading and comprehension with their own native language. So we're super excited to be able to offer the Open Reader. It is a world first. It's backed by Microsoft's research labs in technology. Microsoft has won a swathe of awards. It's had a lot of research done on it as well. And we're really excited to be able to share it with school districts, teachers, and of course with students and their families. And we've seen demand over the summer as well for it. So I just wanted to share that with you. And moving to the question about the essential element to understand as we consider engagement in virtual learning, I would say one thing, and that is learning is about relationships. Technology often forgets this. Technology often treats the student and the teacher as an object, as an algorithm, instead of realizing education is about human relationships. We've always taken that as the number one design principle, even going against the grain in many cases. And we have not let go of that. In 10 years that I've been working in education technology, it's always been about relationships, and how we've embodied that is by helping students and teachers and students with other students to collaborate. Collaboration in our mindset is the essence of relationships. That is the most important factor in teacher's perspective, from a student perspective. If we remember it's about relationships first, then I think we'll come out of this in a better shape, because we've been forced to consider collaboration as being an important part of learning design, an important part of how learning is done. It would hopefully cause a shift away from technology and solutions that are isolate students, which often many technology does. You know, the students are putting their headsets on, sitting in a corner, doing maths. It's right or wrong. You know, that's not about relationships. That's about objects. We have to move away from that and put relationships and collaboration first, and those other more brain-oriented tasks are sort of supplement to that. So flip the pyramid, so to speak. Put the relationships first.
Well said. Excellent. We are not algorithms. I love that. How about you, Tom? What's an essential element?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I think parents have a greater appreciation for teachers now than ever before through this COVID piece. So I think parents are going to be the key to this as well. We've got to figure out a way to support them and provide them with resources that will, we're not asking them to be teachers, but to understand what teachers do, and provide more packages and resources for them to be able to understand, you know, educational ease, if you will. And also another thought is, in many cases now with the frontline workers out there, particularly in low-income communities, a lot of the parents are out working. And so I think we've got to start thinking more about dual generational teaching and learning, and having programs for the grandparents or the aunt or uncle or the 18-year-old that's in college watching the kids while the parents are working. So more of a family-based idea of how we can impact the entire generation of learners in that home. So I think more has to be thought about providing resources for dual generational teaching and learning, particularly in immigrant families and low-income communities. A couple thoughts.
I love that. And I'd agree with both of you, this idea of that duality, because we do have to provide resources, that homeschool connection. And these are wonderful, wonderful essential elements.
I know there's like 5 different topics that we've just brought up here that I think we could unpack and create entire episodes around that have just been discussed. But we need to put a pin in this for right now and say a special thanks to Marissa Di Pasquale of Mindsets Learning and Tom Davis of the Center for Educational Innovation. This conversation will have to continue because we have more questions and they have more insights. While you wait for part 2, please go to the afterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell your friends about us. And as always, you are welcome at our table.